Ready? All right. Well, thank you very much for coming here today. We're here to oppose plans by the City of New York to build another shelter right in the middle of a residential community, and in this case, we're in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn today. This shelter is planned to house 150 homeless men, including those with mental health challenges, and the location is not only in a community of residents, but it is just a few blocks away from 6 different schools in the area. Now, this particular property is zoned for commercial use. So it's originally, in fact, the last C of O from 1997 says that this is supposed to be a medical office, something that is needed in this community. We need more medical services. Wait for the train to pass. Now, many of you may be asking, if it's zoned to be a medical office, why and how are they getting away with this being a shelter? Well, the answer is clear. The city violates its own laws, basically. And what they did here was pass a law to actually allow the city to build a shelter as of right. So what is this? The train's not a great location. So as a result, what we're seeing is a lot of business people being incentivized to actually build hotels to then turn around and enter into lucrative contracts with the city. Make no mistake, this is a business, and our city is incentivizing individuals to take properties like this that's supposed to be for medical purposes, for medical use, and turn it into a hotel for the sole reason, not because there's tourists here in Bensonhurst, not because there's a need for hotel rooms, but it's for the sole purpose of then entering into a lucrative contract of millions, tens of millions of dollars to profit off the backs of the taxpayers of this city while not giving adequate services to the people who are vulnerable that actually need help. So what the city is doing, instead of investing in supportive housing or affordable housing or increasing the number of welfare to work programs to transition people out of homeless shelters, they've instead decided to warehouse individuals. And we are seeing these types of shelters popping up all across the city, particularly in residential neighborhoods like this, which obviously do not want them, nor is it safe if you read what we're seeing happening around different shelters across the city of New York currently. I want to highlight just what a business this has become in the city of New York. If you look at some of these contracts of tens of millions of dollars, some of them go as high as $11,000 per month per room. Think about that. If you have a homeless individual staying in a shelter that's a hotel, the city, we the taxpayers, are paying upwards of $11,000 per room for one individual a month. That is more than the average of 3 mortgage payments in the city of New York. So how does that make sense to have this type of temporary housing solution in which the taxpayers are getting crushed, the communities are seeing quality of life being dismantled, and the person who's going to reside here is not even getting any type of services that they need because it's not supportive housing. They may be able to come here at night, they probably get kicked out during the day, and they'll roam the streets. And again, no services attached to this like you would see in supportive housing. And that is why we are calling on the city, number one, to repeal the 2018 law that Bill de Blasio and the council put in effect that allowed any type of property to be turned into a shelter as of right. No community board, no community input. It is outrageous, and we have a community board for a reason, and we have zoning laws for a reason. So one, the city should repeal that law immediately. Number two, New York State, and I was a member of the legislature at this time, passed a law that required for public hearings before any type of shelter is agreed to. Well, they're totally bypassing this law. They're ignoring this law, the city of New York, because there has been no public hearings on this particular address, or for so many addresses that we can talk about throughout the city of New York. So the city needs to comply with the state law that requires community input and public hearings. Number three, the city needs to look at least having some type of residency requirement to move into a shelter. You just can't come from any state in the country or any country in the world and get free housing in New York City. That's ludicrous. It is unsustainable, it is unaffordable, and that is exactly what's happening right now in the city of New York. And so it's not homeless New Yorkers necessarily that are being put in the shelters. In fact, most of them are citizens of other countries, let alone other states across the country. So there needs to be a change in the city's law that requires at least, maybe it's 2 years or whatever it is, that you were a New York City resident and you fell on hard times. We want to be supportive of our homeless New Yorkers, but we cannot house citizens from all over the country and all over the world that just choose to come to New York City and expect free shelter. And number four, the city and the state should focus on more supportable and affordable housing solutions. We have the low-income tax credit on the federal level, which Ronald Reagan started, and it has been responsible for providing millions of housing units across the country that are affordable for Americans. We just passed legislation to actually expand that, and Senator Schumer can pass it today. We're hopeful. He said that he supports the bill. Well, then he should actually bring it for a vote, because it passed overwhelmingly as part of our tax incentive package, which we passed out of my committee in Ways and Means a couple of months ago. So, Senator Schumer, do Brooklyn a favor, do New York a favor, pass our expansion of the low-income tax credit so we can push the city to focus on more supportive and affordable housing solutions, which, by the way, they could do right now. They're just simply not doing it. Instead, they choose to warehouse people in temporary shelters, a disservice, again, to the community, to the taxpayers, and to the homeless that should have some type of more a secure and sustainable option to transition into long-term permanent housing. So that is what we are standing here today. We oppose this shelter. We'll continue to fight it. We will look at our legal options to see what they are. But first and foremost, the city better start complying with the state law that requires them to do public hearings, stop ignoring the will of the community boards and the community. And again, I want to highlight some of these ludicrous costs before I wrap up. Okay, because you're seeing and these are all in Brooklyn, by the way. They're paying upwards of these various hotels that have been incentivized to be turned into shelters. $143 a night, $320 a night, $366 a night, $270 a night, $247 a night. What does that equate to when you multiply it, the contract, and divide it by month per unit, meaning you have one individual or maybe a family in there. We're talking about somewhere between $5,000 or $11,000 a month. I want to stress that. How can the city of New York sustain paying $11,000 to house an individual in one of these shelters? And what kind of racket is going on that we see all these business people all of a sudden build these hotels simply to go into these lucrative contracts. The comptroller should do a better job of investigating these contracts, because we already know that there's been criminal activity. We already know that people are skimming off the top. Why? Well, there's been a number of arrests here made. Earlier this month, a New York City contractor pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges in connection with a scheme that siphoned money from homeless shelters contracts worth $12 million. He is now faces 20 years in prison as a result. And in October, there were 2 men charged with conspiring to defraud New York City taxpayers of more than $50 million by funneling funds from a nonprofit intended to help the homeless to other companies that they owned. And this individual, they received 12 contracts from the New York City Department of the Homeless, totaling $913 million. Again, let me repeat that, because the train was passing. I think it's important for people to know. These individuals charged in October conspiring to defraud New York City the city must be paying the MTA to do this, so that way they don't hear what I have to say. I wouldn't be surprised. In October, 2 men were charged with conspiring to defraud New York City taxpayers of more than $50 million by funneling funds from a nonprofit intended for the homeless to other companies they owned. We're talking about a company that received 12 contracts with the New York City Department of Homeless Services totaling $913 million. Think about that. So, I just give you the facts. You can put together what you think is happening here. But one thing is for sure, that individuals are being incentivized by the city of New York to put up these hotels in violation of real zoning laws, and they're doing so to make big money on the backs of the taxpayers. And so thank you very much. Let's continue to get the word out, because we're going to fight as hard as we can to stop this shelter from coming to Bensonhurst, and I'll take any questions from the media at this time.